Hello, so welcome to the another class of cloud computing. So we have been here studying about the cloud computing virtualization. So today in this class we will study here about the various virtualization types. Now as we know that virtualization refers to the process of separating the operating system from the hardware. That means we can here create virtual instance of anything. That means for your hardware, for your software, or for your storage. You can create a virtual instance rather than creating or having an actual physical piece of your hardware or that software or your storage system here. So virtualization is referred here as a cost effective and hardware reducing technique. So it has very advantages, or this is a very advantageous technique here in the cloud computing scenario. So today we will here study about the various virtualization types. Now we have a number of virtualizations, like starting from here your hardware virtualization, then your desktop virtualization, server virtualization, then storage and application virtualization here. So we will study each of these virtualization type here one by one. So the very first which we have here is the hardware virtualization. The very first here is your hardware virtualization. That means you are here virtualizing the hardware. Now we know that we have a cloud service models like we have starting from your infrastructure as a service, then your platform as a service, and then your software as a service. So the very first, which is your infrastructure as a service here, so that mainly is based here on your virtualization or like your hardware virtualization, because infrastructure as a service here is supposed to provide the network architecture for your cloud computing system. That means what we need here is the various uh, a large number of hardware components. So that means if we can virtualize the various hardware requirements here, so that will be a very effective technique, or we can say a very effective method here for a cloud computing operations here. So this infrastructure here as a service here is utilizing your virtualization techniques here. That means like your hardware virtualization. So hardware, that means you have to virtualize the hardware. That means various physical devices. So hardware virtualization here basically refers to the creation of a virtual machine. Now we know that we have the concept of virtual machine. We are enabling this virtualization with the help of your hypervisor. Now we know that hypervisor is a layer, software layer, which is here between, like this is your hypervisor. So this hypervisor layer is between the host machine and the virtual machine. That means it is here enabling our virtualization. Now you have here the host machines like this. So that means virtualization on which your virtualization takes place, that is your host machine, and the virtual machines are basically your guest machines which are running on your host system here. So this hardware virtualization here refers to the creation of these virtual machines. Now these virtual machines will act here like your different system. That means like different computer system. Now each of virtual machine will be, or it can use here different operating system and the different applications here, and each of them are completely isolated from each other. So instead of having different different physical machines here for different applications and requirements, what we can have the instance, the virtual instance for those machines. So it will reduce here the complexity of the system by reducing the hardware requirements here. And the software which will be executed here on these virtual machines are isolated. That means they're separated here from each other, and they are separated here from the underlying hardware of your host machine also. So this is the actual machine, host machine, on which this virtualization place, and these are your guest machines which run on your host system here. So like your Amazon Web Services and many vendors here are providing the hardware virtualization here. So this is a key technology here in your cloud computing system here. The very first virtualization type, which is your hardware virtualization. Now, the next one which we have here is your desktop virtualization. This is desktop virtualization. So that means we are here talking about the virtualization of the end user's desktop. So this desktop virtualization is basically the concept of separating the logical desktop from the physical machine. So this is the concept of separating the logical desktop from the physical machine here. So we can say that this desktop virtualization is the virtualization of the end user's desktop. So that means rather than interacting with the host computer directly via keyboard mouse, that means the various system which are used by user to interact, we can interact here with another computer using or another mobile device by means of a network area or local area network or internet. So basically that means at one system we can create here the virtual instances of many desktops here. That means here that various applications or various instances can run here on one machine and they will be isolated with or isolated to each other. Now this desktop virtualization is categorized into client hosted and next one is your VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure. So the very first which we have the client hosted one. So what happens here in your client hosted desktop virtualization? It involves the installation of a virtualization software on the PC, on your device, like your Microsoft virtual PC. Like your Microsoft virtual PC here will be installed on the user's system here. So what will happen then? After the installation of that software on this machine on which you have installed, but virtual or multiple virtual machines can be created for different purposes. That means you will have here, you have one virtualization software and then you can create here the multiple virtual machines here for different purposes and they can run on single physical machines and are isolated from each other. So this is a client hosted virtualization here. Now next one which we have here is your VDI, so which is basically your virtual desktop infrastructure. So VDI here refers to virtual desktop infrastructure. Like Microsoft, one of the example of this is like your Microsoft VDI. This various vendors of VMware View. The examples of this. Now, what happens in your VDI? In VDI, it is based on your thin client server model. It is here based on thin client server model here. Now, that means this process here involves storing the end user desktop environment on the virtualized machine. That means if I'm the user, so what will happen? I'm the end user, so my desktop environment will be stored here on the or will be on the virtualized machines. Now, these virtualizations machines are running or they are located here with your servers. So that means how a user can access. So the user can access their desktop here or desktop environment here through the use of the PC or with the thin client machines. Like we have a remote desktop access technology. So this is similar to that. That means we are not actually having any desktop environment with us, but that is stored here with the virtualized machines and which are located here with the server. So we just need to have the network connectivity and we can access those virtualized environment here. So this kind of virtualization here is like offered by your Microsoft VDI, Citrix end of desktop, and then your VMware view. So this is a desktop virtualization in which you can do the virtualization of the end user's desktop. Now after that, the next one which we have is your server virtualization. This is also a very important type here. This is also being utilized here in your cloud computing scenario. Now, server virtualization, that means we are virtualizing the various servers here. So, does this refers to? So, basically, your server virtualization is the partitioning of one physical server into smaller virtual server. You have one complete one, a actual physical server, but now you have to provide the services of that server or to different number of users. So what you're doing, you're partitioning that one physical server into smaller virtual servers. So why we are doing this? So that your server resource can be used efficiently. Like you have here your systems architecture. That means this is your uh, hardware here. Then you have the hypervisor. After that, what you have various instances of your operating systems and their respective applications. Now, concept of server virtualizations, that means you will have here a different number of virtual servers here. So one of the common use of server virtualization is like your web servers. So that means by using server virtualization here, what you can do, you can provide low cost web hosting services. So instead of providing each computer here a separate web server, what you can do, you can simply provide the virtual servers there, instance of those servers here. So that is how your resource can be used here efficiently. So in server virtualization, what happened? The resource of the server itself are hidden from the user because they are only using the virtualized instances of those servers. But what happens? The software is used to divide the physical server into multiple virtual events. So those were multiple environments or those multiple virtual environments here are called as your virtual servers. And one of the common example here for this is your web servers. Now, after your server virtualization, we have the application virtualization. We have application virtualization. That means virtualization of your application. So that means different applications or different business applications run here on the servers which are located in the data center. So that means this application virtualization is basically the practice of running the software, or it is a practice of using a particular software from a remote server rather than on the user computer. That means you're accessing a software, you're accessing an application from where? From a remote server, then actually having that software on your system. So this is basically like your remote and streaming. Remote and streaming. So In application virtualization, this is the separation of the installation of an application from the client computer. That means you are accessing here or you are provided here with the virtual instances of that particular application. So that's why we're calling here that application virtualization is the separation of the installation of an application on your system, on the client's computer. So we have specific programs which are designed to perform specific operations like your word processing and your image editing here. Now, the first one is the remote one. So remote applications runs on a server. As clear from the name remote that it is located somewhere distant. So that will be here running on the server. Now, end user can view and interact with the applications, with their applications which they require to use over a network by a remote display protocol. That means it provides here a remote display protocol. So that means with the help of this remote display protocol, the users can interact and view the application. So now the remote applications are completely or they will be completely integrated here with the user's desktop so that it behaves like a normal application. So that is how they are virtualizing here the various environment for using the remote applications. Rather than providing those applications on the client's computer, they're providing here remote display protocols. So that will be integrated with your system like you're actually having that application on your system. The next one is your streaming applications. Now, what happens? It will also be a virtualized application. Now, this virtualized application is executed on the end user's computer. That means it will be executed on my system, but when? How? An application is requested. I'm requesting an application, so components are downloaded on demand. So once they're downloaded, a streamed application can function without a network connection. So this is how we have the application virtualization with the remote applications and your streaming applications. So virtualization here is used to provide cloud computing, but both of these things are not same here. Cloud computing is a service and virtualization provides the infrastructure here. Now the last category which we are left here with your storage virtualization. Last one is your storage virtualization. Storage virtualization. Now, virtualization of storage. That means what we are doing here, we are virtualizing here the various physical storage devices. That means actually you are having a distributed storage system here. That means you don't have to have the actual physical storage devices with you. You can just access them with the help of this virtualized environment. So that means what it will do, the storage virtualization here will allow the different users or applications to access the storage regardless of that where that particular storage is located or what kind of storage device is it. That means we're not dependent on the location and the configuration of the particular physical device here. So what happens when the storage is virtualized? So you can access the various resources, but it appears as a standardized system from my system to that host machine. It will be a very standardized system when I will be accessing the storage database. That means I will be accessing whatever I need. So the advantage here with your storage virtualization is that it allows different machines and servers to access the distributed storage devices. So this basically provides here you the distributed storage here. So one of the example here for this is like your SAN, which is your storage area network. So the storage area network is a large network of your storage devices, which is accessed by distributed users, we can say, at different locations here. So here in this class, we have just studied about the various virtualization types, that is the hardware virtualization, desktop server, application and your storage virtualization. So this is all here for today's class. Thank you so much.